Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. That is, if you're in the Central or Mountain or Western time zones. This is Dave Collins. I'm the practice leader for transformation with eCapital Advisors. I've been with eCapital now for almost a year. We've got a varied background. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We are here today to talk about financial and operational planning from a best practices standpoint. Best practices can be kind of interesting. What I find is that what is best for one isn't necessarily best for another. So we'll talk through really practice possibilities that can help you optimize financial and operational planning. Today we're going to discuss, after we do some intros, again, the best practices. We'll talk about why you should do that or be thinking of best practices and how. We'll talk about the A in FP&A, meaning analytics, and we'll close with some concluding thoughts. First off, eCapital Advisors is a boutique consulting firm that specializes in enterprise performance management and analytics. There are a number of things we do in that space, from business modeling all the way down through thought leadership. We have about 90 employees and $25 million in revenues annually with over 300 customers, and we were established in 2001. Here's a NASCAR slide, if you will, with the logos of some of our customers. We have many that are big and many that are small and many that are in the middle between the big and the small. Most of our customers tend to be more toward the central time zone, though we do move outside of that area as well. As for me, I was formerly the global domain lead for analytics at Hyperion. I was part of the Hyperion to Oracle transition that took place in 2007. In that global domain lead role, I got a chance to do a lot of traveling, visited over 40 countries. Once we joined Oracle, Oracle was actually big on publishing content and thought leadership, so I got a chance to co-author a few books on the technologies that enable things like FP&A or financial reporting and so forth. And basically, I'm old. I've got 30 years of experience in this space. No matter what the name was, I remember DSS, decision support, all the way up through BI, through analytics, and enterprise performance management. I was fortunate to be at Hyperion when we really created the space known as business performance management, now mostly referred to as enterprise performance management, which includes FP&A and financial reporting and so forth. So first, we're going to talk a bit about best practices. Again, these are not necessarily take with a grain of salt items, but things that can certainly help you improve your organization when and if applicable. I think the big challenge is deciding when to implement a best practice, how it's going to have an impact on you, and what's the cost benefit of doing so. So I'm going to start with a very simple slide with a couple of numbers. 25 is blue, 97 is green, just checking the color code on your screen there. These are both numbers that are in megabytes, the size of Excel workbooks. What I find still to this day is that many organizations, many businesses are really run out of Excel. Excel is typically the #1 BI tool, the #1 ETL tool, that's extract, transform, and load, the #1 tool for creating a view of your business. And that's unfortunate because it actually creates a lot of room for error. It's an ungoverned approach to creating an application. Largely, I do believe that it should be used as a visualization mechanism into an application, or it should be used for some one-off exercises. It is, for all intents and purposes, a personal productivity tool. Very, very important, but I think a good practice, albeit a best practice, would be to move away from the reliance upon things like Excel or Access to create the applications. There are plenty of applications out there that are worthwhile. A recent study identified top 5 goals for finance, and the one that I've highlighted, #2 there, support enterprise information and analytics needs. I think this is key and critical, especially when it comes to FP&A process. I believe that most FP&A process should be derived from what is around you. You should be looking to leverage empirical evidence to create your plan, your budget, your forecast as you go forward, and you need great analytics to do that. Now, in order to get there, the capabilities needed would be to improve your analytical, your modeling, and your reporting capabilities. Perhaps look at a platform. We'll discuss this, and I'll actually show you, by way of demonstration, some possibilities in just a few moments. Now, keys to achieving optimal FP&A. There are 6 of them from my standpoint. You want to simplify and amplify reporting. You want to get beyond first-order questions, meaning that you want to remove a lot of the detail from a reporting perspective, focus in on the things that are most important to you, and provide a great ability to do analysis. So not reports, but analysis. The ability to go and ask questions of the data is pretty key, pretty critical. What I find is that still to this day, most folks are leveraging Excel to create those massive workbooks because they don't have very good analytical capabilities. They have a lot of standard reporting. Deconstruct the planning process. So the integration, the analytics, the automation of the planning process is paramount in my mind because it should all run together as a continuum. I should have a strategic plan that drives my financial plan and my operational plan. My operational plan should be in support of my financial plan. In order to do that, number 3 is pretty important. You need to optimize the FP&A organizational structure. Leverage the skill that you have. This actually brings us into true workforce planning, where I look at the individuals and I look at what they're capable of doing, and I bring that to bear inside of my various planning processes. Driving operational excellence. So make sure that you have a standard approach to your data, to your master or metadata, and to the process itself. Make sure that you are leveraging the best practices that are applicable to you. Optimize the decision-making process. Use predictive, use historical information to do that prediction, if you will, going forward. Allow that to be one lens of your business. It shouldn't necessarily be the end-all and be-all. In other words, I shouldn't take last year and simply add a percentage to it. That's very, very simple, spread like peanut butter thought process. I should be looking at seasonal trends. I should be looking at things like the weather. I should be looking at social media. That predictive capability is really, really key and critical, especially today with things moving as fast as they are. And that leads us into the 6th most important point, maximize the digital capabilities. Get outside of your organization and tap into data sources that are going to help you figure out where your organization is going, because most organizations are certainly interfacing with the outside world. You are not selling internally, you're selling to your customers. From a playbook standpoint, you really need to be thinking beyond perhaps the mainstream advanced. You need to be getting toward emerging. And so what we mean by that is mainstream should be, I've got great governance and great data integration. I'm leveraging visualization, not just creating charts inside of my spreadsheet. I'm looking to adopt the cloud because the cloud is going to give me much more innovation. This is mainstream, so this is where we should be today or should have a plan to get to. Advanced is getting to digital, leveraging a mobile platform. And what I mean by that is not necessarily looking at information or filling in information on a mobile platform, but truly leveraging it. Using proximity, which is inherent to the mobile platform, would be great. Bringing in RPA or robotic process automation as much as you possibly can. And that doesn't mean you replace people with a robot. I'm working with a company here in the Chicago area that is actually enabling the people to work smarter by way of providing them with headsets, scanning devices, and so forth, robotic types of process automation that allows them to be more efficient. The person is still there, but the person has the right tool for the task. And then moving forward, getting into predictive modeling, this is an emerging trend right now. It's not mainstream, it's certainly advanced, it's more than advanced, but allowing us to get to social collaboration, where perhaps you have, beyond email campaigns, you actually have social media tapping into your customers and allowing them to be more aware of what it is you have to offer. So why is this important, and how do we get there? One of the things that we like to do is look at organizations from an FP&A maturity standpoint. I've highlighted a few items in each of the stages. Starting from the bottom, stage one is basic. This is where we typically find disjointed process, technology, information architecture, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of integration in spreadsheets. A lot of those organizations we work with, we wind up revealing that the information they have is actually in error in some way, shape, or form, because I have to do formula-based logic cell by cell by cell by cell. That's a lot to ask of someone from a maintenance and from an administration perspective, and it's just not a very well governed scenario. Moving up more into intermediate, you've got a synchronized view of financial and operational performance. Again, as I mentioned before, your operational and your financial needs to be in lockstep. In other words, if I am manufacturing something and I have a sales goal of X and my operational capability doesn't allow me to get to X, I have an issue. So I need to make sure that I have that synchronized and it's in lockstep. I need to have a good coordination of my process, my technology, and my information strategy. So I actually have to have built out my financial planning, my budgeting, my forecasting processes across all facets of the organization with a purpose to make sure that they all dovetail one into the other. And then at the top of the house, strategic, that's where I'm starting to get things like my integrated performance management. I'm looking beyond just FP&A. I'm actually looking into financial consolidation reporting. I'm looking at analytics. I'm looking at a more enterprise view of information, and that's really going to be where you start to differentiate yourself competitively. Now, the way we help our customers get there is by assessing first and then executing. It's a bit like taking a step back, looking at where you are, looking at where you want to be, and then creating a roadmap to get there. So if I look through this detail, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, objective, scope, and vision, what's that all about? Well, what are we trying to accomplish? So let's sit down, have some conversations, hold some workshops, speak with the stakeholders, and determine where it is we need to be. And let's get synchronized on that. Let's establish what it is that the organization wants to do as a whole, as well as department by department. In parallel, typically, we look at what you currently have from a technology perspective, from a data perspective. In other words, what is your current architecture, and we define the gaps that might exist and start to think through some additional enabling technologies that might be useful to satisfy the objectives, the scope, the vision. Then we take both of these, bring them together, create a detailed roadmap with priorities set and with stakeholder involvement, certainly, as to a program of projects. And think of the program as a collection. The project is a smaller piece of work where we do from requirements design all the way through build, test, deploy, and get you up and running. I prefer smaller projects so that you start to build momentum. Now, 5 elements of optimal EPM, and I wanted to present this because a lot of the function in EPM to make things work is common, and what I mean by that are points 3, 4, and 5. So the integrated management and operational system, standardizing information delivery, and leveraging advanced analytics. The top 2, financial close and consolidation, that's not an FP&A function, though it does need to integrate with an FP&A function so that I can compare my actuals versus where I thought it was going to be by way of a plan or perhaps a continuous or rolling forecast. So we'll talk about each of these in some level of detail, talking about some of the benefits as well. Now, financial reporting best practices. Having an end-to-end governance on this is critically important, especially if you're a publicly traded company, because you have to comply with federal or regulatory guidelines. In order to get there from a financial reporting standpoint, and even from an FP&A standpoint, you need to standardize on your metrics, your chart. whether it's accounts or products or customers, really all of the above. You need to make sure that you have what you need in order to satisfy regulatory requirements. And the fourth point I think is pretty critical. Strip out managerial or management reporting detail. At Oracle, with our Oracle Hyperion Financial Management, we actually created more of a mixed bag solution that allowed you to do management reporting inside of it. Now, I don't think that really was good from a servicing of our customer standpoint because it muddied up the financial reporting process. If you do this well, if you are looking at this from a best practices perspective, you're going to consolidate faster. You're going to be able to get into journal entries in an automated fashion, so eliminating manual process. You're going to lower your audit fees, and you're going to lower the account and repost costs versus your peers. From an FP&A standpoint, again, I mentioned this a couple times before, linking all of this together is absolutely key and critical. Your forecast, your plan, your budget should have some semblance of commonality between it, and you should be looking not only from a financial but from an operational perspective. You should be reducing the amount of time that you're spending on the FP&A process. You shouldn't be spending months, you should be spending days to weeks. And a lot of times, by using drivers or up-leveling, you'll achieve that. And what I mean by up-leveling is you shouldn't be planning at the general ledger account level detail. You should be looking at revenue. You should be looking at OpEx. You shouldn't be looking at all the detail beneath that. That's going to vary a little bit by industry. But again, suffice to say that you need to, and there's a discussion that needs to be had organization by organization as to what's appropriate. But I shouldn't have equality across the level of detail, the grain of detail, actual versus my budget and my plan. If you do this, you'll actually do much better from a standardized enabling technology. You'll be threefold better than your peer group. There'll be much less time in trying to actually create and compile your process. You'll have a much more accurate forecast, you'll find, which seems opposite in that I don't have as much detail for that reduced cycle time. Now, the next three are the key and critical for really any EPM function. I need to have a great data management process. I need to have common metadata, so customers, customers, customer. I shouldn't have differing lists. I shouldn't have differing naming conventions. I need to bring this together. Oftentimes, because of disparate systems where you have disparate naming conventions, we need to create a repository of the master data so that we can share that with the underlying applications. You shouldn't go and think you need to go and reinvent all of your master data. Rather, there are some applications, some technologies we can use to enable this. And it should be enabled at the business user level because they're the ones ultimately that are responsible for product and customer and the metrics you're concerned about. So enabling the business user, providing self-service from a data standpoint, being able to drill back becomes absolutely critical. Standardized information delivery. Every company I've worked with tends to have every BI or reporting tool known to man. That's not necessarily a bad thing because each of them historically have added different points of value, but there's now so much commonality and due to competition that you've got a lot of the same function tool compared to tool compared to tool. For example, Tableau used to provide a lot of great visualization back in the day. They pioneered that space. Well, all of the other vendors now provide some of that visualization. So what we need to do is take a step back and assess what you need and start to look at the tool sets that will enable that need by way of that information delivery. As I hinted at before, I'm also a big believer in reducing the number of reports. Standard reports, they're actually kind of like key performance indicators. I shouldn't have thousands of them. An analogy from a key performance indicator perspective, if I have thousands of key performance indicators, how key can they possibly be? I should have that reduced. Now, the number that is appropriate for you becomes a discussion point. And again, link the financial and operational data together. Last, leverage advanced analytics. So that's the A and FP&A, but it's applicable across business function, not just financial planning, but in all facets of what you're doing, operationally as well as financially. You want to get into industry-specific analytics as much as you possibly can so that you get away from a vanilla approach to reporting. You want to link that revenue and cost with business drivers so that you can cascade this information. You want to leverage pre-built integration as much as you possibly can. I'll talk about that specifically with a little bit of a demonstration here in just a little bit. And I think one of the big things is to provide flexible delivery options. That is going to help you get away from having multiple tool sets. Look for a platform that has the ability to deliver to the user the way the user needs to consume the information. We'll talk about that in this next section. So the A and FP&A, or analytics, this is a passion of mine. Here is some information coming from EMC Digital Universe. It was an analysis or a study done by IDC back in 2014. I think these numbers are actually higher now. In 2013, there was thought to be 4.4 zettabytes, not gigabytes, not megabytes, not terabytes, but zettabytes. That's a lot of bytes. 4.4 zettabytes of information expanding to 44, so going up multifold, doubling every 2 years by 2020. I think at last look, these numbers are actually low. And a lot of that, I think, is due to the preponderance of social media information available to businesses as well. But basically, analytics-driven businesses are going to be better performers financially at a twofold rate. They're going to be more likely to execute on decisions as intended because they have information available to them, and they're going to be more likely to make better decisions faster because, again, I don't have to cobble together information. I'm still working with organizations where a given process could be, it takes 2 weeks out of the month to pull information from various sources into a spreadsheet, make sure the math is correct, and then provide it to upper-level management. That's just too long. I can get there much faster. Years ago, when I was at Hyperion, I got a chance to listen to Thomas Davenport, and I eventually read his book. There was a compelling passage that I show on screen here. It says, virtually all organizations identified as aggressive analytics competitors are clear leaders in their fields, just like we talked about on the previous slide. And they attribute their success to the masterful exploitation of data. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. It has a lot of syllables, certainly. But think about that masterful exploitation of data. If I can exploit my data, and I can do it masterfully, and I think that is efficiently, it's with speed, it's with accuracy. If I'm able to do that, I can make those decisions that much faster. If you look at an assessment of an analytics maturity when it comes to capability, and this is one that I provided to a recent customer, you start with raw data on the lower left. That's where I'm actually in more of a cobbling together mode inside of, say, Excel or Access, all the way up to the upper right with optimization, where I can figure out on a more predictive basis what might happen or start to really look at the best possible scenario as to what might happen. If you look at your organization this way, I would submit that most of you are in that lower left-hand corner, where I've got maybe raw data up through ad hoc reporting and OLAP. I don't have a lot of folks that are doing predictive analytics as yet. Most organizations are still creating or thinking through the decisions on their own and trusting their gut. I like folks to move away from that and think more empirically. Now, from a front-end perspective, there are a multitude of possibilities, and I'm showing on screen Oracle and Tableau and Click and MicroStrategy. And as I often tell my customers, and have done for years, reports and dashboards are worthless unless what you were looking for is on them. The one in the middle, which is a scatter plot, it's a visualization of an ad hoc view of data, is actually a bit more valuable in that I've got thousands of data points available to me telling a story, versus The others are either a report or they're a bar chart or they're something really taking up a lot of space without showing me a lot of detail. Showing detail becomes the really important thing. The other really important thing, and I alluded to this before, is aligning the user with the way they should be consuming or need to consume information. So is it self-service? Is it visualization? Do they need a dashboard? As you start to look at financial consolidation, do I need to publish? Do I need to create narrative reporting as well? You need to align this, and this is a graphic that I use when I do assessments with customers, and I figure out, certainly on a more detailed level than executive manager and business analyst, as you see on the left-hand side there, I'll start to align the type of consumption that is required by the user within the organization by department. And for a lot of orgs right now, again, it's not to beat a dead horse, but it is, I have everything I need in Excel. Now, what I'd like to do before I close is a very brief demo of a technology that I'm very excited about. I got logged out, so I'm going to log back in. There's a technology that some ex-Oracle folks have put together called Incorda, which you probably haven't heard about. It's relatively new. They've been around now for 4 or 5 years. They've done a lot of work with very large customers like Apple and Facebook and Fidelity and certainly many others. What's exciting to me is the ability they have to tap into the detail that's sitting in the ledger. More times than not, I'm extracting data, I'm pulling it into a system, or I'm dropping it into Excel. Their claim to fame, their leverage point is they actually bring the detail from the transaction system, from the data warehouse, from the operational data store, in state, in detail, into their system. They compress it, and they allow you to create visualizations and dashboards and so forth that are incredibly powerful and compelling. On screen right now, I'm showing you a very simple view of operating expenses. If I scroll down, I see all the journal details coming directly from the general ledger, from the expense side, and then I see the sub-ledger details as well. Now, what I'm able to do is not only just view this data, but if I wanted to focus in, for example, on Cost Center 5100, which is the largest of the 10, it's the top of the top 10, it now filters everything so that I can not only see each of those visualizations focused on just 5100, but it's now showing me just the journal details. Again, the absolute detail that I'm typically drilling through to source systems to get, and sub-ledger details, and notice how fast that was. They're able to, on relatively small hardware, bring in 1 billion rows in about an hour and make available at second to sub-second response time this information. I'm going to show you one last quick example. This is in travel and living expense. This is certainly something that we're trying to manage much better within most organizations. Types of visualizations, top expense reasons. This is actually surveying all the detail from, and I'll scroll down, from the expense report records. There's over 230,000 records in this particular data set, all encased within Incorda, and bubbling up for me in this visualization where the larger the text, the more records there are. So for example, if I click on 10.1 Quality and Scrum Training, it now hones all the visualizations down to just that particular description. If I reduce it, and I wanted to say go by person, I could focus in on Nikhil. These are the activities or the expense reasons that Nikhil is actually putting in his expense reports. I see the total amount there, and now I can see record by record in the expense report what's been going on. So the really cool thing from my standpoint is there are enabling technologies out there that allow me to get to the detail and improve not only my FP&A process, but improve my overall reporting process, be it operational or financial, by allowing me access to information. And if I can do that, I'm going to be much better at these processes than my peer group. I'll be much more competitive. I'll be much more viable from a financial standpoint. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this very brief webcast. I would be more than happy to spend some time speaking with any number of you offline in detail, and we will certainly share the content with you. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.